Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Behind the Block building block session on Coda's new editor. My name is Nathan, and I'm a product manager at Coda, working on the team that built the new editor and enables the new features that we're excited to share more about with you today. We have a great panel today joining us that you'll meet throughout the session, product managers and engineers representing the teams behind the editor and the new features. And we're going to do today's session in two parts. In the first half, we're going to go through a few more demos showing you a bit more detail on some of the context and background story behind the new investments. And then we'll switch over to Q&A, and we'll take the second half of our time together for interaction with you. And we're really excited to hear your questions and get a chance to hear what's on your mind and share more. As we go, feel free to ask questions as we're going, but we will kind of save the questions and answer time for the second half so that we can spend more focused time together going deeper on those. Before we start in the demos, I just wanted to briefly share a bit more context of the story behind the new editor and what led to it. And it all started a couple of years ago when we set out to reimagine what Coda's tech surface might become. And as inspiration, our designers went out and compiled a collection of the most beautiful documents and websites they could find. And as they did this, they started to deconstruct them into building blocks that we might be able to provide in Coda. Next, they took a number of real documents that our makers had published to the gallery, and they gave them all a makeover. What might they look like with a professional designer's touch? And while the result, as you can imagine, immediately inspired all of us and led to a roadmap of exciting new building blocks that it could enable makers and their teams to more efficiently organize their content and present it in the most beautiful, compelling way. And the two features that we're talking about today of Canvas layout and Canvas columns immediately rose to the top of that list, and they stood out as fundamental building blocks that could enable a wide range of scenarios. And each of them was also very frequently requested by our customers today, and I'm sure many of you had some of these requests. Well, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Teresa, and she's going to share more about Canvas layout.
Hi everyone, my name is Teresa and I'm the product manager on Canvas Layouts. As Nathan mentioned, early in our design process, we thought about how we could enable makers to build beautiful docs and build more use cases in Coda. From y'all, from our community, we heard that certain use cases such as dashboards, side-by-side images, project briefs, team homepages were really hard to achieve in the single column layout we have today. To achieve those use cases and even more, we're really excited to introduce Canvas layouts to transform your docs by putting content side by side in a Coda doc. So to show this, I have this rental listing here for Joshua Tree. And as I scroll down, you can see this is how it looks today in a single column layout. So let's scroll to the top and let's show how this can become Canvas layout with multiple columns. So first, to create multiple columns, I can simply drag and drop to put content side by side. Now, this is just text, but I can do this with any Coda building block, including images, such as this. Now, when I'm dragging and dropping, you'll notice that in the active columns, so here I have one column and two, there's this active column divider so that I can see where my columns are, so that if I want to drag and drop content within, it's very easy for me to see where exactly I'm dragging and dropping. Now for my favorite feature within Canvas layouts, there's this little resize handle here. I can simply hover over and then drag to resize, and my content also will responsively resize with it. Moving on to these highlights of this rental, we wanted to make sure it was really easy for you all to drag and drop your content in this side-by-side layout. And so one feature we added was that for lists, we make sure your lists stay together so that it's really easy to put these next to each other. I can select all the content here and move it over here to reorder. So you can quickly shift if you want one column in one place and the other. And then finally, we look at our photo gallery, and it's really hard to see the images here. So I'm going to take this image, put it next here. The next image, I'll move up here. Now let me resize so that it aligns. And now I have this beautiful Canvas layout for my rental listing. Now, as a reminder, here's what it looked like before. all in one column, a lot of scrolling. And now I have this beautiful layout that's really easy to digest and still has all the content in a really nice way. So I want to pause real quick and talk a little bit more about some design decisions we made. So as you'll notice in the design of Canvas layouts, we wanted to make sure we had this beautiful layout and a beautiful presentation as you can achieve in a typical website app, like a website designer. However, it was also really important to us that we kept the familiarity and efficiency of a great authoring environment. For many teams, including ours, writing and collaborating in Coda in text is the majority of what we do in our day-to-day, developing, sharing, iterating on ideas. An excellent collaborative writing experience is where I can still type in these columns with my team while still having a beautiful presentation and layout. So what does this mean in terms of design? First, we felt that it was very important to keep this single selectable range. So what this means, if I select text here, I can cross the boundaries and select all the text like that. I also, if I go down to these highlights, I can have my cursor on this bottom right bullet and cursor up and cursor down, and there's no jumping around, no cursor getting lost. I can just do this across the whole page. By contrast, tools like website designers often require you to insert a text box here, a text box there, and it's really hard to navigate across these text box regions. In contrast, here in Coda with these columns, I can select across columns, I can drag and drop, I can copy and paste, and it just works as you would expect a flow editor to. Now, bringing it back to where I started, the real motivator behind this, or one of our biggest motivators, was to unlock these use cases that we've been hearing from you all. So to show this a bit more, I want to walk through some sample docs that we put together that really highlight all the use cases you can do with Canvas layouts, as well as show how any building block can be in a Canvas layout. So to start, here's an example of a blog post. And as I scroll down, you can see images and text side by side. Next, we have a beautiful resume that highlights selected work using Coda building blocks such as buttons. We have a project overview. This one's highlighting design principles. Here's a team page, for example, for our Canvas layout team. Here you can see we have building blocks such as charts or tables, buttons, formulas. You can build a beautiful website, such as this wedding checklist and timeline. Here's the checklist and images. Here's an example of my personal homepage. I'm pulling in packs, such as the Google Calendar pack, my favorite music, links, embeds, images. And one use case I know we've heard a lot of chatter from our community about is dashboarding. So just like you can put any other content side by side, you can put charts side by side. This is just showing charts, but you could also put tables, buttons, anything side by side. So you have a really clean dashboard so you can see all your metrics at a glance. So we're really excited to hear how you all will use Canvas layouts. And as we've mentioned, we're offering early access to this feature that you can sign up for after Block Party. So with that, I'll hand it over to Adam to talk a bit more about our next building block, Canvas columns. Thank you all.
Thanks, Teresa. My name's Adam, and I'm an engineer here that's been working on the Canvas column feature. I'm really excited to be here today to share some of the capabilities that we've been building out over the last few months. Let's jump right into a live demo in which I'm going to essentially build a table to track stand-ups completely from scratch. So here I am in a blank page, and I'm going to go ahead and paste a small skeleton of what could be a stand-ups table. And so for some of the newer folks who might not have seen, folks newer to Coda who might not have seen all these features before, this is just a stand-ups table. We have 3 columns. There's a date column, an attendees column, and a notes column, which currently is just plain text. And when we talk about structured data, what we really mean is that, like with these tables, which are one of Coda's most powerful features, it's structured in such that every single row will have a date, an attendees, and a notes column, which makes a lot of sense to structure a stand-up. But with Canvas columns, we now offer a new capability in which we can set a format for this notes column to Canvas. And just like that, you can see we now have a new icon indicating this is a Canvas column. So if I open up this Canvas column, you can see right away that we actually already have started bringing in some of the features from the page straight into this canvas. You can see OnGod is here with his collaborator cursor, which for me is one of the magic moments when you realize that we now have the full capabilities of a rich text editor inside of a cell. So he's going to go ahead and paste what looks like our agenda for a particular stand-up, and you can see right away we have a heading for the agenda, and I can go ahead and say comment on this region and say, actually, we're already rolled out to staging here. So again, this is just all of the features that you would expect in a normal page. You can also add, for example, a sentiment tracker, one of our core rituals here at Coda. And you can see, again, we have headings, we have buttons, checkboxes, formulas, and even tables that can be incorporated into these Canvas columns. And this is a table just like any other. If you want, you can go ahead and add conditional format, for example. I might want to set the sentiment to be a gradient. So, if you're feeling good, you'll have green. If you're feeling not so good, it'll be red. And so, as you can see, this is bringing all of the power of a page into our table itself. A couple other things I wanted to show. So if we close out of this row detail, there's a few other things that are kind of fun. So if you come into here, we have some Canvas options. For example, you might not prefer to see the icon. You might want to see a preview of the canvas itself. So if you come in here, you can see a bit larger preview of what's going on. You can see a sentiment tracker is in there and what the agenda was. Another thing that might be kind of interesting is, for a stand-up, you might be doing this every week, every couple of days. It would be nice if you can create these templates a little bit more simply. So for this, we might go into the Canvas options and add a value for new rows that are added to this table. And so we can say that maybe this 10.6 notes can be kind of the template for all future rows. And so just by setting up a simple formula referencing this canvas, we can go ahead and every time we want to add a new stand-up, we can just go add a new row. And that will go and incorporate that template that we just created into the notes column, which is super useful. Anytime you want to have a new stand-up, you can just go ahead into this row and change anything that you might want to. For example, post block party recap. And I think that's a quick tour of all of the capabilities that we're enabling. And I want to turn it over to OnGod now to show a bunch more use cases of Canvas columns.
Hi, everybody. My name is Angad. I'm the PM who worked on this feature. I just want to kind of, add more color to what Adam and Shishir have kind of already introduced in this feature. So, obviously, this is the Canvas columns feature, which brings together unstructured and structured data together. But I want to kind of share what are some examples where that can actually be really helpful. And in particular, just pick up from where Adam left off is meetings, right? So meetings are a very common type of ritual. And I just wanted to show some of the common patterns we've seen people like in Coda using to run their meetings. So a really common example in Coda as well as in other tools is people use a heading of some kind to have a repeated pattern for a meeting. So every time they have a meeting, they'll have a heading with the date or some other topic, and then they'll have maybe subheadings or something like that. This is a really common pattern, and this is something we see people use in Coda all the time as well. The only issue is every time you want to do this, you have to kind of recreate the structure by copying and pasting or some other method. Another really common pattern in Coda, we have pages that you can add to your sidebar. And so we'll see lots of people add, a new page for each meeting. So for each meeting, you would have a separate page. And then within that page, you can still have the same structure. But again, the issue is that each time you create a new page, sorry about the noise. Each time you create a new page, you have to try to recreate this structure. And then another example, kind of more similar to what Adam just built, which we see all the time, is people will build a row for each meeting, with a table, let's say a bunch of structured fields, like who are the attendees, what's the date, agenda, and then you might have a text cell for notes. But again, the obvious downside here is you don't get the full power of the canvas. You can only put text in this notes cell, cannot collaborate, cannot add comments, and cannot add objects. And then finally, another really common pattern, similar to what Shishir was showing this morning, is having a topic for each a row for each topic. So here's a topic voting table, really common example in Coda. And you can do things like, voting on topics in meetings, but then you're limited to taking notes inside of a text cell. So as you can kind of start to imagine, a Canvas cell, we think actually kind of brings the best parts of each of these structures without the downsides of them. And I'll show you an example of what that might look like. So here's a real document that I took from our gallery, which is for one-on-one notes. And if you actually see the instructions here, it says for the next meeting, just copy and paste the folded one-on-one notes and change the date. So what I'm expected to do every time I have one-on-one is to select this text, press copy, and then, this is a published doc, so I can't, but paste the text and then change the state, which is kind of cumbersome. And it might mean that people don't perfectly follow the structure each time. So I've kind of recreated this as a table. So here I have a date column, and then I've actually created 3 different Canvas cells for each of the structured topics that I want. And then I'm going to flip this to a detail view for those who've never seen this before. It's one of the view types that we offer in Coda. And just give me 1 second. Let me show a different place. All right. Yeah. So as I was saying, this is like a detailed view that you works very similar to each of your.
It seems like OnGuides might be having a couple of connection issues right now. But as you can see, there's a number of exciting use cases that the new Canvas columns enables. And we're excited to see your use cases as we invite you to join us in a beta of the new feature as well. And wanted to mention here that all of you will be receiving an email after the event that includes a link to sign up for betas for the new editor in these new features. And our teams are very eager to hear your feedback and see your use cases as well. And we can maybe return in the Q&A if you're interested in seeing a few more examples, and we can come back to those in a bit. Sounds like OnGuide's back, so I'll hand back to OnGuide to take you through a few more of those use cases.
Sorry about that. Yes, I was kind of, I think, in the middle of showing this example of this existing doc that I've converted into a table instead of a page. And so I was going to convert it to a detail view, which is one of the view types that we offer in Coda. And here you can actually see the same sort of structure that you expect, in an Evernote or Apple Notes type of product, where you have your each of the meetings is on the left, but each of these columns now has a section for all the different topics that you cared about. So topics, goals, notes, etc. And every time you create a new meeting, now all I have to do is just press this button, and it's going to give me a section for each of the things that I care about. So I don't have to go ahead and copy paste, and even the date was added automatically using a formula. And down here, I have this action item section where, in this document, it's being tracked separately, but now I can actually have them linked to each other. I could even add an action item, and again, the date is added automatically. And down here, I can still track all of my action items. So that's a really simple example of a meeting ritual that you can now do in a lot better way using Coda. Next, I wanted to show some other examples of what you can do. Obviously, this could be applied to all kinds of rituals like CRM. Here's a product roadmap that a real customer is using. And so here they have upcoming features that their team is working on. And you can see that when you open this, you have a combination of some structured fields like which quarter is this product going to release, or what's the team that's working on this. But they've also added some canvases for people to be able to answer some questions around a feature. And so obviously you have the full power of the page. So in this next example, you're going to see some charts that the person who's written this write-up has chosen to put in to explain, and even with side-by-side content to explain the motivation for this feature. But again, once you add a feature, we've created this ritual of like, now if I want to propose a feature, I can add some of those same structured fields, but I'm also expected to answer some of these questions to think through what is the goal of this feature that my team wants me to think through. Next, I wanted to show another quick example from the gallery. This is a content calendar that we've published. And again, you can kind of use this to coordinate upcoming blog posts with your team. But a problem in the past was you could use this to track all the structured fields, like when is it going to be published, or has it been published already, etc. But you can't really use this to collaborate on the actual content of the blog post. That needs to be drafted somewhere else because you don't have the power of pages inside a table. But now you can actually do that right in line. So here I've recreated that same example, and you can open this table. You can track the same structured fields, like who's the author, when do we plan to publish this. But down here, you actually have the full power of the canvas again. So you actually draft that blog post right in line. In another example, you'll see someone's even added a comment in line. And so you can really use this to kind of pull all your workflow in one place, track your upcoming blog posts, as well as to be able to actually collaborate in line. And then lastly, I wanted to kind of dive back into this example that Shishir showed in the keynote really briefly, and maybe, just to kind of give you a sense of how Canvas columns connect to the other building blocks in Coda. Here's a meeting notes table, very similar to what Adam was building. You have some notes in this row, and I want to be able to use the formula language to pull out the action items automatically. I just want to kind of show you, with a little bit of formula language, how far you can go. So in here, they're using this pattern where every action item has the phrase AI in front of it, and I can kind of use that. I'm going to write the formula with you in like right now. So here I'm pulling out the content of the notes column. You can already see the text of the canvas is actually being pulled out in the formula language, which is great. Then we have this formula called split, which lets me split the content by any character. So I'm going to use that to split all the contents of this canvas in separate lines. So I'm going to break it on the line break, and it's basically returning the same canvas, but one line at a time. And then I can use that to filter all the lines, and I only care about the lines that actually have that start with a certain value, right? So they have to start with AI, and so I'm just writing the starts with formula that exists in Coda, and I can just write AI, and you can see now it's only returning the lines that start with AI, and maybe to just make them look really nice, I can return a bulleted list. And so here you can see it's actually pulled out just the action items from that meeting, because the actual notes are super long and I don't want to display them on this table. But it's really easy to write a formula where you can pull out, here's another example of a summary that you can pull out from the notes automatically. That's it. Thank you, and sorry about the interruption.
All right, thank you, Angad. Well, the next thing I want to do is share a little bit more about some of the smaller benefits, but really important quality of life improvements that the new editor brings to your team beyond just the big new features. And it's because we care a lot about your day-to-day experience working individually and with teams in Coda. I'll start by explaining a little bit more of what we actually did behind the scenes as we rewrote and improved the new editor. You can think of this as adding a new dimension to the editor. Previously, we represented the entire content of a page or canvas as one long string of text. And so if you were editing text in the middle of the page, we literally would count how many characters that is from the very start of the page. As you can imagine, that was a little inefficient. Well, we've now added a new level of structure and hierarchy to the editor, organized around lines or paragraphs. And that brings several benefits. One is performance. You'll be able to have a faster experience as you type, as instead of having to update the full page when you make an edit, we only have to edit the specific paragraph that your change is in. It also improves the scalability of our internal systems, in particular as you're collaborating with others and we're merging those changes together. And additionally, it improves the quality of the product as we've simplified the ways that other building blocks in code and Coda intersects and interfaces with the editor. Next thing I want to talk about is collaboration. Collaboration is extremely important to us, and we know it is to many of you. The teams are working together in Coda, writing, reviewing, and editing content together. Now, already in Coda, you can have an excellent experience editing text together. 3 people can be in the same paragraph at the same time. Everyone sees each other's cursors, and edits coming in real time. If someone loses a connection, they can keep typing, and when they come back online, everything merges perfectly. But as we introduced more concepts to the editor of additional ways of layout and structuring, it was really important to us that we preserve that same level of excellent collaboration. I'll show you an example of a scenario and what we did to make it work well. So in this example here, I have the same document kind of side by side, and the left side, you can imagine, is Jason, and the right side is me. Now, Jason is working from a train and temporarily lost his connection, and as you can see, he's offline right now. That's no problem. He can continue typing and editing. So he goes ahead and does so and makes an edit to this paragraph. And I'll pause right there. Now, you don't see that on the right side because Jason's offline, but he'll come online in a minute. Now, in the meantime, I'm on the right side and thinking about how to present and format this document. And I decide to move his paragraph and say, well, wouldn't that paragraph look really nice next to this image? So I move it over here. And now I'll pause and ask, what's going to happen when Jason comes back online? He's just edited a paragraph, but that paragraph has moved. Now, the answer in many editors is quite poor. In many other editors in this scenario, Jason's edits would be entirely lost, or they would end up in the wrong location. And we felt that that would be completely unacceptable. And so we invested deeply so that we could merge changes both to content and structure at the same time. I'll jump ahead a second, and you'll see in a moment as Jason regains his connection that everything merges perfectly. And so you can now collaborate with full confidence across all kinds of collaborative scenarios that your team can confidently work in documents together. The next thing I want to talk about is formulas. Angad showed you some great examples, and formulas are one of Coda's powerful building blocks that helps enable powerful and creative scenarios leveraging text. And we have a number of formulas that intersect with the text surface. As we updated the editor, we took the opportunity to review common customer feedback for some of these formulas and found cases where we heard about a lot of frustration and difficulty in what should have been simple scenarios. And so we updated a number of formulas with more predictable and improved behaviors, and also added a couple of new ones for convenience. And I'll show you a couple of examples. First is working with lists. So imagine you have a table like this, and it's a list of sessions that you're planning to attend today. And if you want to, put those into a nice numbered list of what am I doing today, 1, 2, and 3, you can write a formula like this that says I want to take this table, pull out the summary column, and create a numbered list from that. And what you would hope for is number 1 for each row, number 2 for here, and number 3 for here. What you would actually get before is not that, but you would get a number for every single row within every line within every row. And we found this was confusing, and we heard a lot from customers trying to achieve a scenario like this that they felt should be simple, and how frustrating it was to try to format their text that way. And so we've now updated this to be more predictable, so that row number 1 is always number 1, row number 2 is always number 2, and we apply the numbering to each individual input as you intend. The next example is merging text with different styles together. This is kind of a quick example of you might be putting together maybe a message template, and you want to combine text with different styles. And so you could write a concatenate formula like this that says I want to take my intro text and then a list of items, then a conclusion, and compile those together. And what would happen before is you would get a messy result where we merge the styling of lines together. And we heard a lot from customers who would get really stuck and frustrated at that point, and sometimes even give up. And what people really wanted was something that looks nicely formatted like this. But to achieve that, there was an incredibly complex formula and set of workarounds that you would have to learn. Well, we've updated that now. So the simple formula does the simple thing. And we now preserve the formatting of your lines as we merge text together through this formula. Next thing I want to show is headings and collapsible headings, another powerful building block of Coda's editor that we've already had, but a really powerful way to structure write-ups so that readers can expand and collapse content on their own. Now, in the past, if somebody was reading a long write-up like this, they may have kind of been tracking their progress of where they've expanded. And if they close their tab and they come back to this document later, we would lose their location in the context of what they've done. And when they come back, everything would be collapsed again. We've now updated that so that when you come back, we'll remember what was expanded before, and you can pick up right where you left off. The last thing I'll show is that sometimes it's helpful to direct your readers to a specific part of your document. And you can click on a heading, and you can copy this link, and it would send readers to that location. But there were cases before where that was a bit fragile. And if you make some edits right around that line, those links could break. And we've done a lot more investment in making those scenarios more robust. So you can now share links to a specific part of your document with confidence that readers will be taken to that location, regardless of the changes you've made after sharing the link. So that's a quick summary of some of the smaller but impactful quality of life improvements the new editor brings. And just to recap, we've got an exciting new editor with 2 powerful new features, the Canvas layout that helps you achieve beautiful and effective presentation, and Canvas columns that help you blend unstructured and structured content in really flexible ways. And underlying all these is a smoother experience. As I mentioned before, look out for your email after the event. You'll receive an invitation to fill out a form to sign up for the beta, and we can't wait for you to try it and share your feedback. So at this point, I'm going to transition back to our panel, and we will invite the panel back onto the stage. Again, we have product managers and engineers from all of the teams behind these features here, ready to answer your questions. Great. So the first question I have is, What was the biggest engineering challenge you faced building this? Jason, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, I can answer from at least the core editor aspect. I'd say it's hard to put a finger on exactly one thing that was the core challenge. I think it was more of the number of interfaces and building blocks within Coda that we had to interact with. We took all of our learnings and experience from working with our old editor and basically built everything from the ground up. And so a large part of this project was not just building the editor, but also making sure that it integrated with everything that Coda can do. And so that holistically, I think, was kind of one of the larger challenges. I'm not sure if Adam or Gleb want to answer from a multi-column and canvas column type perspective.
Sure. For canvas column, I think kind of a similar answer. Probably one of the biggest challenges was thinking about how canvas columns integrate with the rest of the building blocks in the product, and maybe I'll give a couple examples there. So I mean, for one thing, we needed to make sure collaboration worked well. Previously we kind of had like a existing way of doing collaboration inside of a page, and we have an existing way of doing collaboration on a cell. And so now we kind of wanted to bring both together and make sure they work seamlessly. Another example is with the formula language. So now that we have this idea of a page inside of a cell, what happens when you want to access that value? What happens when you're inside of that canvas column, and how do you what if you want to access the row outside of it or something else in the document? And so we've been working really hard trying to think through all the implications there. And so I think the biggest challenge when you start thinking about adding these new building blocks that can be game-changing features is how they fit in with everything else that we already have.
Yeah, and for the canvas layouts, the main challenge, I think, was figuring out how to make all the existing building blocks fit inside the columns. So making sure that all the tables, buttons, and everything that Coda provides will look good, no matter how thin, how narrow your column will be. That took a lot of figuring out, but I think we did a good job on that. Yeah.
Great. The next question we have is about mobile, and how do these docs fare on mobile?
Sure, so I can take that. So I'm the PM on Canvas layouts. My name's Teresa. So on Canvas layouts, we do support mobile, in that all your content in a Canvas layout in those columns will stack vertically. The reason we made this decision was that so it was really easy just to continue scrolling. So all the content is still there and it will just stack. For Canvas columns, these also do work on mobile. But this is something we'd love to get your feedback on during the beta as well.
Great. Next question is, how will the new editor work with already created docs that currently have a single column layout? And also, how will this affect printing documents?
I guess I can take that. I forgot to introduce myself, by the way. I'm Jason, one of the engineers on the team. But so Coda has kind of a general capability to roll out changes and upgrades to documents in the corpus. We're constantly shipping and iterating at a pretty high rate. And so it's one of our core mechanisms behind the scenes is to take existing documents, rebuild them with new sets of features, and basically do a transition for our existing customers without them ever really noticing. And so behind the scenes right now, we're working, our backend systems are basically working on rebuilding all of our existing documents with the new editor. And when we're ready to launch, we'll end up flipping over and all existing documents will end up be using the new editor. As far as printing goes, we expect everything to basically work the same as it was before. No meaningful changes are hopefully noticeable.
Great. The next question we have is asking a little bit more about Canvas columns and wondering how those are different from or the same as layouts, and whether you have the same formatting options. I think Angad, you showed some examples of kind of combining those two features together, and maybe you can share more about that question.
Yeah, I think there are two different building blocks, but as with every building block in Coda, you can almost always put the building blocks together. So Canvas layouts is generally for putting content side by side. Canvas columns are for bringing unstructured, flexible surface into structured data. But obviously, with that flexible surface, you still get all the full power of the page. So within that Canvas cell, you can definitely do layouts. So I think I showed a couple of examples, but in the Canvas cell inside a page, you can still put content side by side. You have the same number of columns, same formatting options. So you shouldn't have any of the compromises that you used to have to make with using a text cell. Now you have the full power of a page inside of a table. I hope I answered your question, but if you have a follow-up, I'm happy to take it.
Good. The next question is, what did the decision to completely rebuild the editor feel like, and were you nervous? I can start on this because it was definitely a big decision for the team. And as I mentioned, it all started with these design explorations. And we stepped back not to look at just one feature, but the kind of whole future roadmap of where we wanted the product to go. And we faced this decision of, do we want to kind of incrementally enable the next feature, but then face more roadblocks as we wanted to go further down the line. And we started to consider that option of, should we go a little faster and get one thing out quickly, but then not be able to invest as deeply or with the same level of quality. I think one of the key moments for us was when we started to look at the collaboration scenarios, like the demo I just showed you, of like, without a deeper investment, the risk of us not being able to really fully preserve all of your collaborative edits in every scenario was something we took really seriously, because the integrity of your data and collaboration is really important to us. The other thing I'll say is, like, when we looked at the opportunity of rewriting the editor, it offered so many more benefits beyond just the big new features of just a better, more sustainable code base, better quality interaction through all the details you work with as well. And decided, like, as customers, you really deserve the best. We'd heard those frictions and wanted the opportunity to address the feedback you've given us on the small things as well. And this was a way to go and do that. Jason, anything you want to add from the engineering side on that?
No, I mean, I definitely think there was a little bit of nervousness. I think frequently in engineering projects, there's an urge to rewrite something and you kind of want to resist that because it's usually better to build forward. But I think as we looked more and more at it, we were really concerned about being able to support these rich layout features on our existing model. And it felt like this was so important that it was worth doing a full rebuild for. In part of like de-risking that process, we spent a lot of time up front really thinking through what were the most concerning aspects and prototyping those, running those across the engineering team. Like, we've had upfront very early, we had a model that we felt pretty confident about from a collaborative perspective. And so that gave us some confidence to move forward.
All right, the next question we have is, can you reference, I think this is for Canvas columns, is can you reference the row from within the canvas that's on that row? I.e., do you have this row in that canvas's context? And I'll turn that to Adam.
Yeah, it's a great question and something we've been thinking a lot about actively with the team. Kelsey, one of our engineers, and Evan Brooks, one of our designers, have been really focused on this problem recently. It's definitely something that we hope to support. The details, as you might imagine, are pretty tricky, and so we're trying to make sure everything kind of fits seamlessly together in the formula language. But definitely something we hope to implement and ship, and definitely would love feedback once we're ready for the beta on how that feels to folks.
Great. Next question is, does the canvas work with a wide page layout? Teresa.
Yeah, so it does. All the demos I showed were on our standard page width, but you can toggle it to be wide and the canvas layout will still show up and you'll have more space to build things horizontally.
Great. Next question is another question, I think, eager on to understand some of the details of Canvas columns. Question is, are the tables that are created inside a Canvas column cell, are those unique tables or can they be views of the same table? So for example, when you set the value for new rows, did that create new tables or views?
Yeah, it's another great question. So right now we're thinking of it very much similar to how you might think about pasting, a cell from one place to another. So right now, by default, we're creating views of that table. But you can definitely imagine that one day we might want to support an option for essentially duplicating the table itself. And again, this is something we would love feedback on in the beta. just to hear what feels natural and what we can improve.
Yeah, I'll just jump in for a second. I really appreciate these, questions from some of our more advanced makers, because these are the things that we are currently, struggling with as well. So I think right now the default values thing, what Adam showed you is a really early version. When you, for example, duplicate a page, we give you the option. You can configure it to have either a view or a copy of the table in a new table. So we could definitely build it that way, or we could do a different version. And would love feedback from you guys on that, on what's valuable, what you guys are thinking. I'm guessing there's scenarios for both.
All right, the next question is kind of a broad question of what was the biggest learning you and the team had in the project? Anyone want to start?
I can start. So I think one of the biggest learnings we've had, and something we're still learning, is the balance on the canvas layout between making it discoverable and adding those hints that I showed of where the columns go and where you can put content, and balancing that with making sure the doc is still really clean and not cluttered. So this is something we've done a lot of user research on and user testing to try to find that really delicate balance, and something we're also looking out for in beta. I don't know if any other team wants to chat about their learnings.
I could talk a little bit about from an engineering perspective. One of the things I think that was a big learning for myself as I jumped into the project early was really understanding some of the trade-offs between a typical flow-based editor and a typical block-based editor. I don't think it's immediately obvious to the end user, but as we start looking at these trade-offs of how to make a familiar, rich text editing surface and supporting layouts, you start to notice that one of the advantages of kind of a block-based editor is that not only the layout structure, but the fact that it tends to handle collaborative moves very efficiently, or effectively, I should say. Whereas a flow-based editor tends to have collaboration that works better within a paragraph. And so that observation is kind of one of the core things that started us thinking down this path of can we merge those two? And I think that was one of my bigger learnings at the start of the project.
Great. The next question I see is, are there any updates on syntax highlighting or markdown updates for developers and others? And we've heard that request before. Excited to hear it again. And yeah, as I mentioned, we set out on this project to be able to enable a whole roadmap of features. And so we started with some of the bigger, more horizontally enabling ones, which we were showing today. There's many more we're considering as well. We don't have updates today on that, but we would love to hear more from you on the other ways you would like to see the editor improve, as well as we have a foundation that can allow us to more quickly iterate and offer new functionality like that as well. If there's other things like that you're eager to see us invest in, feel free to drop a note in the comments and also share it in feedback as you use the beta. Next question I see is there a way to navigate between canvas cells? Can we create links or buttons that can open a canvas?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think right now our stance is that the canvas should not be as much of a standalone object like any other cell in Coda. We don't want to treat it like a special, more like a page. We want the row to feel more like the page, because settings like the name of the row, the cover photo, etc., will still live on the row, while the canvas content will live inside the cell. So, all the existing functionality should work, like opening the row, having a button to open a row, having a URL for a row, etc. We haven't really thought about, letting you open the canvas as an isolated object. We feel like, it might be something you might think you can do, but it seems like a better use case to not allow it. But definitely curious to hear the scenarios. Again, feel free to share those with us, and definitely can take a look at some of those things.
Great. Another question I see here is, when I export this blog layout into a rich text field, will it keep the layout? Not sure if it might help if you want to clarify in the chat a little more about that question, but I think maybe the idea is kind of how do we preserve kind of the content and structure as you're kind of moving content maybe into other contexts?
Yeah, my understanding is they might be changing the column type, and that's something that obviously the text cell format does not allow you to have side-by-side content. So I'm not quite sure what will happen, but I think generally with Coda, if you did that accidentally and changed it back, we try to preserve it for you. So it may not look the best when you change it to text, but when you change it back, hopefully it'll try to preserve the value.
Great. We've got another question now on which Coda components work best in columns. And Gleb, you want to take that?
Yeah, sorry, I haven't introduced myself previously. I'm also an engineer. Part of the team was working on the canvas layouts, and definitely we've tried to make all the Coda blocks work great in the columns. So yeah, as I said, it was challenging, but I'm pretty sure that all of them work equally well. And yeah, that's up to you what you put in the columns.
Great. I see another question here about pricing and just the object quota for the free plan. And the question is, how will nested canvases count towards the object quota in the free plan? Angad, you want to take that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's something we thought about because of the intersection of in the doc size. We look at the number of pages in your document and the number of rows, some of the components to the doc size. And so I think right now our plan is to not change anything. So if you were to move your pages to be cells, then we would just count against the row limit, which you could argue would give you actually more generous, in terms of pricing. You could actually use Coda for more page-like content. But again, there's plenty of other reasons to pay for Coda. So hopefully you'll find other reasons to, upgrade. And we don't want to be, forcing you to upgrade if you're not found a use case yet. I think with the combination of the fact that you can have many canvases on each row, and then you can have many rows in each table, you might hit that 50 row count really fast if we ended up counting each canvas as a page. And so we don't want to force people down that track.
Great. The next question I see is, how do you anticipate the performance of pages will be affected by these massive updates to the editor? Jason.
Yeah, so when we were building the new editor, performance and scalability was very much front of mind. When you're in the old editor, which was much more flow-based, it was, Shir mentioned, I think that the entire document was basically represented as a linear string with a bunch of data structures on the side that would track the styling of lines and the styling of individual characters. And when updates came in, there had to be a number of updating to those data structures, and then that would translate into what are the set of actual DOM nodes we're rendering on the screen that you see. In the new model, which is closer to a block-based model, the set of nodes has a much more direct translation to what you're seeing to some degree. And so some things like, simply inserting text is a very quick update of a single specific block on your screen, and we can more optimize what we have to update when we re-render. And from that aspect, things should be significantly faster.
Great. Another question I see is whether the new editor will support backlinks. It's something that's not directly supported yet, but again, as I mentioned, we're building this to support a number of things in the future. And so eager to hear more about your use cases for additional capabilities like that as well. I will add that the ability to have canvases as cells in tables does make it easier to reference canvases. And as Angad showed some of those formula demos as well, the ability to have formulas over the text surface can already give you quite a bit of flexibility in referencing text and linking to text in different locations as well. Next question is, what is an example of how you've iterated the feature while building? Maybe Angad, you can start with that. I think you're on mute, Angad.
Thanks for catching that. Yeah, I think for us, probably the biggest question was what the model should be, and Shishir kind of touched on this in the keynote. But on one extreme, you could imagine we could go down the track of making every text cell be a canvas. So why not have all text cells have all the power of a canvas with being able to put in objects, collaborate, comment, etc. And I think there's some reasons not to do that. On the other side, you could imagine it being much more like a special object, similar to what we do with comments. Every row has comments on it. It's not really a building block. It's just an object that we attach to the row. You can't access it formulaically, etc. And so we were really trying to find which end of that spectrum do we want to be in, or what medium do we want to strike. And I think that column type, it was a very long cycle of lots of iteration, discussion, etc., lots of prototyping. But I think what we ended up with was the most important thing for us was being able to connect it to every other building block in Coda. So, we already showed some of the things like building blocks, like formulas, conditional formatting, all that, but you can pretty much do anything. You can have certain canvases visible on some layouts, not on other layouts. You could write a formula where somebody forgot to fill out a certain canvas and you can warn them, etc. You can do all those types of things because it's a column type. I think maybe somebody has a question around why the collaboration, why you wouldn't want all text cells to be collaborative. And I think if you think about it, there are many use cases similar to what the Excel, of the worlds do, where you want the enter to commit. You don't want the enter to give you a next line. You want to have only one person editing a cell at the same time. And so all the short text use cases, we still wanted to preserve the non-canvas like use cases where, you want to overwrite somebody else's changes, etc. And so having those two different text, the model that we chose actually ended up being the one that we felt like was the best, but it did take a lot of iteration to get to it.
I can talk a little bit more about another way we iterated on Canvas layouts. So the area that we focused on was making Canvas layouts discoverable, and we did a lot of user testing. Gleb also was involved in it. And through that, we made some changes on how the drop targets showed up. We started with a lot, then we took some away. We also talked about different entry points for creating columns. So I showed the drag and drop, but after some research, we found it would be better to have additional entry points. So you can use the / command as well. And we're adding some other features to make certain column interactions, such as reordering, deleting, more discoverable based on the user testing we did.
Yeah, one area I'll add where we also iterated was on some of the formula language updates, that we reviewed a lot of kind of realistic scenarios to understand how customers are using different formulas in different cases. And as we started to build a deeper understanding of different use cases, that would shift our perspective a little bit on some of the details of a few formulas. I'd say also as we got deeper, we kind of found more inconsistencies that we weren't always aware of as we got deeper. And that gave us an opportunity to make similar improvements as well. Next question is, can column groups get bigger than the canvas?
So I can take that. So as of today, the column groups can get as wide as we make the canvas. You can put it into the wide setting mode we touched on earlier. Making canvas groups bigger than that is something we haven't yet explored, but would love feedback on what type of column groups you'd like to see wider than the canvas. I can think of a couple, like dashboarding or maybe images. So something we have top of mind, but would love to hear feedback from you all.
Great. Next question here is, are on-canvas text boxes or controls still the same for the whole doc, or are they on a current user basis? So they mean like a controller text box modified by one user, will that be seen by others? Yeah, so for those who aren't familiar, that's a kind of a feature that Coda has already, where you can have interactive control like a text box or a dropdown that you can use to kind of add custom input and filter. There's some feedback we've heard. I think this customer is mentioning of sometimes you want that to be individual to the user. We're quite aware of that. It's not related to this effort, I would say, but that's kind of a distinct opportunity that we're aware of and hope to prioritize in the future as well. On that note, I think there was a previous question around sharing of pages as well, and whether the sharing model might change. I'd say that's similarly feedback we're very aware of, and know that many of you have scenarios where you want to share individual parts of a document, like a page. I think we're interested to see how usage patterns might change with Canvas columns, as well as more content might shift into a row. And we expect to see maybe a different type of feedback, and would love to hear more from you around your patterns of working and how you'd like to share your content. And so it's an area we're continuing to build more understanding and explore some ideas kind of apart from the editor that might address that. Next question is, what's your favorite document that you've built with the new editor? Anyone want to share one?
I can start. So I think one of the ones that was most fun to build is one I demoed, which was my personal homepage. I was trying to get as many Coda building blocks as I could while also highlighting my favorite things. So it was pretty fun to try to drag everything into a canvas layout of all the things that I loved. I don't know if anyone else has a favorite they'd like to share.
I mean, I can just say that, like, internally we're using the new editor everywhere, and I've really appreciated how we've like rebuilt a lot of our stand-up documents and sync documents to leverage canvas column type and multi-column and all the various building blocks in the new editor. And it's really, I think, helped us restructure and become more organized, and appreciated it from that standpoint.
Great. Next question we have is, are there any changes to the API with these changes?
I guess I can take that one from the Canvas column side. Yeah, it's a great question, one that we're actively thinking about. I think as kind of like an initial approach, we're wondering if we can kind of have a similar idea where we preserve the basic text in the Canvas column, but we totally understand that there are a ton of use cases that might want richer data, such as formulas and tables inside of those Canvas cells to flow through. And so we're still kind of thinking through the options there and what that might look like from the API perspective, and would love to hear any use cases from you guys about how you might leverage Canvas columns from the API.
All right, the next question is, when I take a blog post that I've written in Coda with a side-by-side layout, I'd like to know what happens when I paste it into a website that actually posts the blog, and does that layout persist or break?
I guess I can answer this one. So I mean, this is going to depend largely on the tool that you're pasting into. Coda tries to maintain a pretty standard set of export features. So like when you copy any set of rich text within Coda, we're putting onto your paste buffer in your browser a couple different formats, like plain text, as well as a very rich HTML model that should mimic what you're seeing on the screen. On top of that, some internal structures we use to support more magical features when moving content around within Coda. And so when you paste that into like a blog posting tool or another document surface, what you get on that end is kind of how they end up interpreting the HTML. So for the most part, I would expect the structure and the layout to be persisted and maintained.
Yeah, and I'll also say here, like, we know sometimes there's a need to publish in another site, but you can also publish your documents directly from Coda, and we hope that the beautiful layouts you create in Coda, if you publish those directly from Coda, your viewers will get the full fidelity experience and be able to leverage all of the visual changes as well as the structured content. If you want to kind of share a little more structure with your writing with Canvas columns, you can do that as well. I think we have time for one final question. Question is, how quickly after we sign up will we be able to get our hands on this, and will it be a separate workspace?
So I can take that one. We'd love for you to try it out, and after Block Party, we'll be emailing a link for you to sign up. Once you sign up, if selected, all new docs that you create will have the new editor enabled. And then we also have a section for you to put specific docs that you'd like to have the new features, and we'll review them to see if they're a good fit. We would love to hear feedback from you all. So if you head over to community.coda.io, our community page, feel free to share feedback. And in the beta, we just want a lot of feedback from you all on these new features. So we'll be asking for it in different ways. But yeah, if you have any other questions, that's where you will go. We'll be monitoring it pretty frequently today. And thanks so much for having us.
Great, thanks everyone. Excellent set of questions. Really exciting for us all to hear what's top of mind for you. And thanks for joining us.